A special edition of Fantasy Football today. We're talking about the NFL trade deadline and 5 trades that Chris Towers wants to see happen in what promises, Chris, to be the spookiest, scariest trade deadline ever.
The trade deadline. Ooh.
Oh, nice. The grave deadline. No, the trade deadline. That works so much better. Anyway, Chris has an article out right now at cbssports.com/fantasy with 5 trades that he'd like to see happen. And everyone's talking about a Derrick Henry trade. Derrick Henry to the Ravens. I think you have a much better idea for Derrick Henry. Where would you like to see him go?
Yeah, look, Derrick Henry to the Ravens would be fine, right? Like, that's obviously a great offense, a great running game. The problem is this is a team that always wants to cycle through running backs. And look, maybe that would be different if Derrick Henry was there. But I think given how much they use their running backs, the likelihood of him getting 25 carries in any given game in Baltimore are lower than they would be in Cleveland, which is the place that I'd like to see him in, because we know this is a Cleveland Browns offense that when they've got their elite back, in the past it's been Nick Chubb. Obviously his injury this year changed that. They're willing to just throw them out there. And what I love about Cleveland when you look back through the Kevin Stefanski era is even when Nick Chubb's been out, there have been times when like Dearness Johnston was getting 19, 20, 24 carries when he was filling in. So I do think if Derrick Henry went to Cleveland, it would be a situation where I would probably just project him for 20 plus carries every given week, which is not something that I typically do. In Baltimore, it would probably be more like 18 carries per week. Now, Baltimore, it's a better offense. There might be more scoring opportunities. Cleveland does have those offensive line issues, so it's not quite as good of a situation as it has been in the past, especially given their quarterback concerns. But I think they would be thrilled to have a guy like Derrick Henry that they could just lean on, run him 20 times a game. And there have still been signs of the explosiveness from Derrick Henry. He's not the guy he was 3 years ago. He's not the guy Nick Chubb has been. But I think Derrick Henry, if he's going to get traded anywhere, I think Cleveland would be the best case scenario for his fantasy outlook the rest of the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like the idea. However, I'm a little worried about it because I don't know what to expect, if anything, from Deshaun Watson at this point. Right? He came back last week, and he said after the game, he said recently, he just didn't feel right. So doesn't know how long he's going to be out with the shoulder injury. And I just think that this offense could be really bad. So I don't think we're going to get those 20 carries per game from Derrick Henry, because if you look at what he's doing on Tennessee, the 2 games they've won, he's had over 20 carries. The 4 games they've lost, not even close.
The distinction there is in Tennessee, Tyjae Spears is occasionally playing more snaps than Derrick Henry. I believe he did in their most recent game. And that's mostly in passing situations, but Tyjae Spears has had a role. And look, maybe they would still use Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, but
I think they would. No, they'd use Ford. I think they'd use Ford and maybe Hunt. But
I think there's a chance of that, but I think it would be more like what we've seen with Nick Chubb in the past, where, remember, when Jacoby Brissett was their quarterback last year, and granted, I think Jacoby Brissett's probably better than the version of Deshaun Watson we've seen since he came back from his suspension last year. But when it was him, when it was previous guys, when the offense wasn't going well, it was still a ton of carries for Nick Chubb. That's what they want their offense to be like. And I think Derrick Henry would give them a guy that they can trust to both make big plays, which Jerome Ford has been doing, but also to keep the offense on schedule, which Jerome Ford really hasn't been doing outside of the few big plays.
So last question on this one. If Derrick Henry gets traded to Cleveland, would you rather have Henry, the Brown, or Tyjae Spears, the Titan?
It would be Derrick Henry. I like what we've seen from Tyjae Spears, but again, that offense would be really bad without, obviously without Derrick Henry. It's already been pretty bad so far, but, we're looking at probably at least a couple more games of the rookie quarterbacks with Ryan Tannehill already having suffered a setback from the ankle that he had surgery on last offseason. I do think there's a chance that things just keep getting worse for Tennessee.
Okay, Tyjae Spears, only 31 carries, but incredible, terrific advanced metrics so far. So I'd love to see an opportunity for him. You'd like to see Jerry Jeudy go to the Buffalo Bills. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Thursday night the Bills made some changes to their offense, getting the ball out quick. I think I saw in the third quarter it was the quickest time to throw of Josh Allen's career. I don't know if that remained the case throughout the rest of the game, but I would assume so, because we saw Gabe Davis having, short area targets, trying to get him the ball in space. Gabe Davis is not that guy. Gabe Davis is a nice receiver, but his biggest skill set is the ability to go down the field and get the big play. What we've seen from this Buffalo offense over the past couple of years is they really need someone else besides Stephon Diggs who can do the intermediate and short area stuff. We've seen, Dalton Kincaid has had that opportunity this season. He did have a good game in week 8, so hopefully he keeps building on that. But I think there is still room for a wide receiver who, yes, can make plays down the field like Jerry Jeudy can, but also just is a great route runner. And what I really like about this one is there's kind of a melding of styles with Jerry Jeudy and Josh Allen, because one of the critiques of Jerry Jeudy in Denver has been he tends to freelance on his routes a little bit. He doesn't run the route exactly like it's scripted. He kind of tries to get open a little harder, gets a little off rhythm. But with a guy like Josh Allen, that's kind of his whole thing, is he's not making every throw on rhythm. He's extending plays. He's making sure that he's got his eyes down the field and can make the big play. I think that would be a really good fit with Jerry Jeudy's skill set as well.
All right, and another wide receiver potentially on the move could be Marquise Brown, and you'd like to see him go to the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll tell you what, I'd like to see him stay in Arizona with Kyler Murray. In the first 6 games of last year, he was the number 7 wide receiver per game, on pace for 181 targets, 122 catches. That was with Kyler. Without DeAndre Hopkins, certainly I'm not going to expect that. But I actually think Arizona with Kyler might be the best spot for him. But why do you think Marquise Brown would be a good fit for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Because the Chiefs don't need a number 1 wide receiver. We always do this thing where like people will screenshot the Chiefs depth chart and like, look how good Patrick Mahomes is with these wide receivers. And it's like, well, yes, but he has Travis Kelce. They don't need a guy who can go and do everything. They don't need a Stephon Diggs type. What they need is a more reliable downfield playmaker, and I think that's what Marquise Brown can be. You can see it with Patrick Mahomes when he's getting ready to pull the trigger on those downfield throws to like Sky Moore. You can see just a little bit of hesitation. He doesn't quite trust the guys that he has. Marquez Valdes-Scantling only goes downfield. Marquise Brown has a more varied skill set than anyone in the Chiefs receiving game. I do agree it seems unlikely that the Cardinals would move him because they want to see what Kyler Murray can do coming back from this injury in a new offense. But if he was going to get moved, I think the Chiefs would be a good landing spot, not just for what it would do for Marquise Brown, but also, making Patrick Mahomes. We've seen some inconsistency this season from a fantasy perspective. I think adding some talent there would help.
Would you rather see Marquise Brown on the Chiefs or Marquise Brown staying on the Cardinals?
I think Marquise Brown on the Cardinals would probably be better for Marquise Brown.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, then maybe you should consider Marquise Brown's feelings for once. Samaje Perine. Samaje Perine is really being taken out of the offense in Denver. He's played 17% and 25% of the snaps in his last 2 games. He has a combined 7 touches. You'd like to see him just go anywhere.
Back to Cincinnati. Hey,
sure.
Let's get him back there. Give them that reliable backup that they haven't had this season for Joe Mixon. But for me, it's just, can we clear this logjam in Denver? We know Sean Payton wants to use multiple backs. The problem is he trusts Samaje Perine. Samaje Perine is a running back that coaches can trust. He's not a running back who makes plays necessarily. He's not someone who breaks the big play like we've seen Jaleel McLaughlin and Javonte Williams do. And so what I'd like to see is just get that temptation out of there for Sean Payton. Get this guy who we know he trusts, but he's boring for fantasy. I'd like to see what happens when Javonte Williams can play 60% of the snaps and Jaleel McLaughlin still has room for 40% of the snaps. Whereas right now it's like if Javonte plays 55 and Samaje Perine gets his 20%, leaves very little room for Jaleel McLaughlin, who has looked like a very, very good playmaker in this offense. So I'd like to see what happens if we could consolidate this Denver backfield.
And the last one is you want to just see any quarterback go to the Jets. And who though? That's the problem I'm having.
Yeah, that's
here.
The problem.
Jameis Winston, Chris.
Mac Jones, there have been like some tiny little rumblings. Like, I don't think Mac Jones is especially good, but he's a lot more trustworthy than Zach Wilson. Obviously, I think Kirk Cousins would be the pipe dream, but I don't think that's going to happen. But I think the problem is just the one thing that Zach Wilson's doing this year is he is throwing to Garrett Wilson. That was a problem last year. His target rate this year up around 30%. So that's great, but the quality of those targets is still really bad. I think I would love to just see a steady hand on the wheel in New York. Not a great quarterback, but someone who could just get the ball to Garrett Wilson in rhythm within the flow of the offense. That's something that Zach Wilson just can't do, and it's holding Garrett Wilson back. He's still a boomer bust wide receiver too, someone with huge upside, but the problem is all of that upside comes from Garrett Wilson. The quarterback is doing nothing. Every play Garrett Wilson makes is him having this gargantuan effort, either making circus catches for touchdowns or taking slants to the house. I'd like to see him just get a little bit of help and not have to do it all himself.
Yeah, I wonder if he's going to be a 2nd-round pick again next year. Probably a 3rd.
Depends if we see Aaron Rodgers at all at the end of the season.
Oh, at the end of the season, yeah, assuming we won't there. But that is Chris Towers with his 5 trades he'd like to see. Read the article, cbssports.com/fantasy. Thanks for watching Fantasy Football Today.